You ever walk out of a meeting and just think to yourself, I heard a ton of words, but what did anyone actually say? It's so frustrating, right? But here's a thought. What if that confusion, that vagueness, isn't a mistake? What if it's actually the whole point? We're going to dive into why this ambiguity isn't some kind of communication breakdown, but a really powerful tool, a tool that's used to protect people in power.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll talk about that frustration we all feel. Then we'll look at why we always blame the individual before we flip the script and see ambiguity as a tool. After that, we'll get into the specifics, what protections it offers, how this whole system keeps itself going, and finally, how we end up in this weird, stable, but totally unclear state.
All right, let's kick things off with a feeling I think we all know way too well. You're just drowning in words, but you can't find a clear answer anywhere. So you get a statement like this. We are actioning a paradigm shift to leverage our synergy moving forward. I mean, wow, it's got all the greatest hits, right? Paradigm shift, synergy, actioning. It sounds so important, so strategic. You feel like you should be nodding along, like it means something profound.
But then you stop for a second and you ask yourself, wait, what does that actually mean? Like, what are we doing? What's the paradigm we're shifting? The sentence is all smoke and mirrors. It's designed to sound like it has authority, but when you look closer, there's literally nothing there.
So, when we're faced with that kind of empty language, what's our first instinct? It's to find someone to blame, right? We immediately assume the problem is with the person who said it. It's got to be some kind of personal failing. Yeah, our brains just kind of default to the easy answer. We think, oh, that person's incompetent, or they're just trying to be evasive, or maybe just, wow, they're a terrible communicator. We go right to judging their character. But the reality is, it's systemic. What we see as incompetence is actually strategic. What we call evasive is actually incentivized by the system. And what looks like poor communication is really just someone being extremely risk-averse.
And this is the key moment. This is where we need to totally shift our perspective. We have to stop thinking of all this vagueness as a flaw, as a bug in the system, and we need to start seeing it for what it really is, a feature. It's a tool, and a very powerful one at that.
Yep, this whole thing actually has a name. It's called strategic ambiguity. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's the purposeful, the intentional use of vague language. The goal is pretty genius in a way. You let different people in the audience hear exactly what they want to hear, and at the same time, you, the speaker, are completely protected. You can't be pinned down to any one thing. All your future options stay wide open.
So let's be super clear about this. This is not a communication breakdown. I'll say it again. It's not a breakdown. It's a shield. When you see this happening, you're not seeing a failure. You're seeing a strategy working perfectly. Okay, so if it's a shield, what's it protecting them from? What are the actual threats? Let's get into the nitty-gritty of how this vagueness creates this kind of safety bubble for leaders, both psychologically and professionally. The big one, number one, is plausible deniability. It's simple, really. If your statement could mean 5 different things and one of those things blows up in your face, you can just deny it. You can always say, oh, that's not what I meant at all. And just like that, it's almost impossible to hold them accountable when something goes south. Next up, it's all about maintaining flexibility. Think about it. When you make a clear, specific statement, you're closing doors behind you. You're committing to one path. But vague language, that keeps every single door open. A leader can change direction on a dime and never once have to say, oops, I was wrong. Oh, and it is absolutely brilliant for deflecting responsibility. A leader gives a super vague order, something like, just improve team morale. Now, the whole burden of figuring out how and all the risk of failing is pushed down onto their team. And here's the kicker. If the team pulls it off, the leader takes credit for their brilliant vision. If they fail, well, then it's poor execution by the team. See how that works? It's a classic win-win for the person in charge. And finally, this is a total masterclass in managing dissent. Let's say you've got 2 groups and they want completely opposite things. If you make a clear decision, you're guaranteed to make one of them angry. But if you put out a nice, fuzzy, ambiguous statement, well, then both sides can read into it whatever they want to. Everyone can project their own hopes onto your words. It keeps everyone happy, at least for a little while, and it kicks the conflict can down the road. Now, you might be thinking this is just about a few clever or sneaky individuals, but it's so much bigger than that.
This behavior, this tool, it gets woven into the very fabric of an organization's culture. It creates this powerful, self-reinforcing loop where being unclear becomes the default, it becomes the norm. So check out how this cycle works. Step 1, a leader uses ambiguity, and hey, it works. They dodge a bullet, maybe even get praised. Step 2, their employees see this. They're watching, and they're learning a crucial lesson. Being specific is dangerous, but being vague is safe. Then, pretty soon, being able to talk this way, this ambiguity fluency, it becomes this unspoken but super valuable skill. The people who get really good at it, they get labeled strategic, they get promoted, and what do you think they do once they're in charge? You guessed it, they use the exact same playbook that got them there, and the cycle starts all over again. Which brings us to the final piece of the puzzle. If this is so frustrating for everyone, why doesn't it just stop? Why is it that when you try to ask for a straight answer, it almost never works? Well, it's because the system has settled into what you could call a stable but very unclear state. You see, the system itself is built to resist clarity. When you go to a leader and ask for a direct, clear commitment, you might think you're just asking for help or information, but that's not how it's seen. To them, it feels like a threat. You're trying to take away their shield. You're trying to remove their flexibility, their plausible deniability. You're essentially asking them to take on personal risk and accountability, the two things the entire system is designed to help them avoid.
And that leaves us with a pretty uncomfortable final thought. We spend so much of our energy fighting for clarity, assuming that it's the ultimate goal of communication. But what if we've been judging the game by the wrong rules? What if the goal of the system isn't clarity at all? What if the real goal is stability? A kind of shaky, fragile stability that's only possible, ironically, because nobody is ever 100% sure what's actually going on.